Hi everyone. Someone asked me if I would do a video on why I don't think the fetus is a person, so I decided I'd try and fulfill that request today. Let's start with a little bit of history, beginning with the Bible. A lot of people think that the Bible actually prohibits abortion, and that's manifestly not true. In fact, the Bible actually recommends abortion in cases of suspected infidelity. Check out Numbers chapter 5, verses 11 through 29 if you don't believe me on that one. The Bible also recommends infanticide in Psalms 137, and child rape even in Genesis 19. So the Bible isn't a terribly good book when it comes to the morality of treating the young. The medieval Christian worldview, including their legal system, viewed abortion much more like theft rather than murder. The penalties for assaulting a woman who was pregnant and killing her fetus, but not her, were tantamount to stealing a valuable piece of property rather than actually killing a human being. The British common law, which was of course deeply influenced by Christianity, famously draws the line at quickening, the moment in which the woman first feels the fetus moving. It was thought by many at the time that the quickening was the moment when the soul officially entered the body of the fetus, and that looked like a nice hard and fast line. Prior to that it was dead and lifeless, but boom, the moment the quickening happens, suddenly you have an actual real human being. Now, of course, no one really believes that anymore, at least no one that I know of still buys to that quickening line. But the thing about quickening is it doesn't seem like a point at which you can draw the line. And that's what everyone's looking for, is where do you draw the line? How do you know when it's okay to kill a person and when it's not okay to kill a person? Difficult question. And so a lot of people thought, well, the easiest way to do it is to let's just draw the line at the moment of conception. That's the clearest possible a line you can draw. Prior to conception, it's clearly not a person, and it's hard to say throughout gestation exactly when it becomes a person, so let's just draw it in the place where we know there's a massive difference at the moment of conception. One problem with that line of thinking is there is no moment of conception. That term is a misnomer. Conception is not a momentary thing, it's a process. It takes about 24 hours. It's very, very much a gray area, as gestation itself is. So you can't really point to any clear point in the whole process of conception where clearly before it's just it's just a sperm, it's just an egg, but now it's clearly a fetus, it's a zygote, it's definitely a person. There really is no hard and fast point in that whole 24-hour period that you can say. So it would be nice if we could draw a hard and fast line at conception, perhaps, but that's not going to work. Well, okay, you might be saying, after that process is complete, at least, after that 24-hour period, don't we then have a clear-cut person? Isn't that thing clearly an individual at that point? Well, not really, unfortunately. Twinning can actually occur up to 2 weeks after conception. Now, if you think that the soul enters the fetus, or the zygote, at some point in the process of conception, what happens when a week or 2 weeks later you have twinning? Does the soul split along with the zygote? Does God send down another soul 2 weeks later? Or maybe you think monozygotic twins actually share a soul. None of these solutions work. So that sort of metaphysical and theological speculation is not going to be able to answer the question of abortion. So I think if we would want to answer the question, we have to take a deeper look at the core question that I led off with. What do we mean by person in this context? Like I said, metaphysics, theology, that kind of stuff isn't going to help. But science also really isn't going to be able to answer this question for us either. It would be nice if we could just rely on science to take a look at this and settle it for us, but it's not going to happen. Science needs to inform the discussion, of course. But if we want to answer this problem, we have to do some deep conceptual analysis as well as some moral philosophy. So what does the term person mean in this context? It's clearly not just a biological category. It's not synonymous with human being. That's just too reductive, too simple. In this context, what person has to mean is something like conscious entity. Persons are beings that have a subjective perspective on the world. I'll use Tom Regan, the moral philosopher Tom Regan's phrase. A person is an experiencing subject of life. Persons are not just biologically alive, they are biographically alive. There's a story going on in their head. It doesn't necessarily have to be a long one or a detailed one, but there's some experience that's going on that makes them a biographical as well as a biological entity. Now this is where the science comes in. The capacities for that subjectivity are neurologically determined, and of course there's an awful lot about the brain and about consciousness that we don't completely understand yet. It still is a big mystery exactly how this whole thing works, but we are cracking away and we are learning quite a lot. And one of the things that we seem to know pretty well now is that the seat of consciousness is somewhere in the limbic system, and the subjective or aspect of our consciousness seems to derive primarily from our prefrontal cortex. These aspects of our brain do not develop until very late in pregnancy, in the 3rd trimester. Now, if you take a look at actual abortion statistics, 91% of all abortions performed in this country are performed in the 1st trimester, that is the first 12 weeks of gestation, long before the limbic system of the prefrontal cortex are core and in place. 9% of the abortions performed in this country are performed in the 2nd trimester, 24 weeks or fewer after gestation. And that is one. If you do math right there, you realize that's 100% right there. Only 0.01% of all abortions performed in this country are in the 3rd trimester, and almost all of those are done for emergency medical reasons. So, really, the subjective aspects of the brain necessary to have consciousness are only in place for, at most, 0.01% of abortions performed in this country. So, at best, only late-term abortions kill actual persons. But I would actually resist even that, because the neural structures in question actually aren't even fully formed at birth. In fact, it isn't until a child is actually a few years old, somewhere about 2 years old, that those neural structures really come into place. Now, I know you're probably thinking, wait a minute, does that mean that I think there's no moral problem with killing infants? Of course not. I think there are moral problems with killing infants. It just means that infants aren't persons. Just because something isn't a person doesn't mean you can do whatever you want to it. To use a simple example, the Mona Lisa isn't a person, but destroying it would be a grave moral offense. Infanticide and abortion are not the same thing. A woman has a right to an abortion, not because she has a right to kill the child, but rather because she has a right to control her own body. This is the same reason why it's okay to kill a rapist in self-defense, because the woman has a right to control what happens to her own body. Once the baby is born, killing it is no longer necessary for the sake of controlling her body, so she no longer has any right, or for that matter any reason, to harm it in her own defense. Well, maybe you're saying, surely at least then fetuses are potential people. Could that work? I mean, they will become people if they're left alone, for example, if the normal natural processes of gestation and birth are allowed to take place. Can we appeal to this idea of being a potential person to solve the problem? No, that's not going to work either. A potential person is by definition not an actual person. If X is only a potential Y rather than an actual Y, it's irrational to claim that we should treat X as if it were an actual Y. You can take a skin cell off my hand here, clone it, and create a person. So the skin cells on my hands are potential people. Does that mean they should have moral rights? Of course not. That's ridiculous. I am potentially the President of the United States. Through a highly improbable but not impossible series of events, I could end up being the President of the United States. That doesn't mean that I should now have the right to dictate foreign policy. That's a right that the actual president has, but the potential presidents don't have. So a potential person, by definition, does not have all the same rights and privileges as an actual person. So appealing to potentiality here isn't going to work either. Now, on topic, the issue is quite complicated morally, metaphysically, conceptually. I don't presuppose that I'm solving and settling the issue here. This is not the ultimate post on abortion or anything like that. But I do think that the reasons put forward here give a strong reason to not think that fetuses are people. And this is just, again, tip of the iceberg, just a sampling. So I hope you found this intriguing and thought-provoking. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear what you have you share them down in the comment section. Thanks a lot. Bye.